Hello everyone, this is part 10 of What If Naruto and Ino was detectives, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Anything. Ino asked out when she heard Naruto end his phone conversation with the headquarters. Nope. No sign of Karen. She groaned, but it was exactly the news she'd expected. After all, Karen had managed to elude the police most of the week, so it wasn't surprising that she'd been able to slip out of a bathroom window at the coffee shop and go on the run again. Of course, it would have been nice if Naruto and she had anticipated that little maneuver so she could have posted herself out the window and stopped the woman. Instead, they have to accept the fact that Karen had provided them with a lot more questions than answers and then lulled them into allowing her to escape. Since hindsight wasn't doing much to improve her mood, Ino moved on to the second point of contention. The wedding dress, or more specifically, her mother's wedding dress. In the adjoining room, she heard Naruto open the fridge. Maybe an early dinner would keep him occupied while she tried on the dress. It wasn't really modesty that made her want him to stay on the other side of the wall. She just didn't want him to get the idea that she had stars in her eyes and marriage, a genuine marriage, on her mind. She didn't, really, but she still found herself mumbling profanity under her breath when she held the dress in front of her and glanced at herself on the mirror. Ino frowned. What was it about lace and silk that managed to make a woman look great, even when that woman didn't want such cosmetic changes? She was practically glowing. To think that she wasn't the glowing sort. Or was she? After dwelling on it for a couple of miserable seconds, she realized the idea was growing on her. Well, growing on her if the glowing part included the spiky blonde hottie on the other side of the wall. She was definitely in trouble. Since it was making her depressed and since there was no chance she'd be able to do the dozen silk-covered back buttons by herself, Ino put the dress aside and moved on to an important logistics problem. Her weapons. Hiking up the satiny floor-length slip to her waist, she planted her bare foot on the bed and strapped on a leg holster. Then a second one on her other leg. They'd make great backups, but she still needed a primary position with better accessibility. It'd take her too long to work her way through the yards of silk to get to two semi-automatics. Those excess yards could get them killed, a thought she quickly pushed aside. However, that thought didn't stay pushed aside. It came back with a vengeance, and every worst-case scenario started racing through her head. The sniper opening fire, Naruto in the path of the bullets, or Naruto protecting her by throwing himself in the path. No matter which way it played out, he'd be right there. Directly in the path. Of course, she'd certainly do the same, which meant they'd be so busy protecting each other that it would increase the risk 100 times over. With each image came the inevitable slam of adrenaline. An increase in her heart rate. A tightening of her muscles. Her imagination was a little too good because her body was reacting as if the danger was right there in the room with her. Which in a way, it was, she soon realized. Lara Croft has nothing on you, Naruto commented. He was standing in the doorway, one hand bracketed on the frame, a bottle of beer on his other hand. With his shirt unbuttoned and his spiky blonde hair mussed, he looked like the main player in her darkest fears. In her hottest fantasies. And the source of her only sanctuary. She wasn't sure though which one worried her most. Maybe you can put your primary in your bouquet, he suggested. She heard herself mumble, it's not big enough, but the truth was his comment barely penetrated her consciousness. Ino turned and went to him. Not for S. It would have been so much easier if it had been just for that. But she needed to melt into his arms. She needed to feel that all would be right with the world. At the moment, she just wanted those frightening images of snipers and death to go away. And she knew that Naruto could do that for her. He could become her sanctuary. And he cooperated. Naruto put his beer on the dresser. As if he had all the time in the world, he circled his arm around her. He drew her to him and touched his mouth to hers. Slow and lingering. Tender. A touch that gave her a little too much time to consider exactly what was happening. Her slip was cut low in the back, and Naruto skimmed a finger down her bare skin, tracing her spine all the way down. The heat rolled through her. I won't have to think about this if it's fast, she whispered against his mouth. I know. With that reassurance, he didn't speed up. In fact, that single stroking, sliding finger on her back slowed to a trickle. Hardly a touch at all. He handled her like a fragile, paper-thin crystal and fueled a lot of flames in the process. Did he know what this was doing to her? No doubt. Ino tried to speed things up on her own. She French kissed him, deep and hungry, and then took those kisses to his ear, and then his N. A major attention getter, she'd already learned, and his slight rattle of breath let her know she'd gotten his attention in exactly the way she wanted to get it. She pushed down the slip, stepped out of it, and with his cooperation, she maneuvered him across the room. The cooperation didn't continue. Naruto stopped them just short of the bed. He leaned down. No hurried motion, either. He brushed a kiss on the top of her right B. Then on the left. He kept on going down. Kissing her stomach, her hip, the lower front of her underwear. Until he reached her ankle. Finally, she thought, this would lead to something wild, hot and fast. A bout of mind-boggling-ness that would occupy her mind so she wouldn't worry. But he slid his clever hand up, over her leg, over her knee, and slowly, leisurely made his way to her thigh. Naruto eased out of the bed. The room was dark, pitch black, actually. He'd been so wrapped up in Ino that he hadn't even noticed that the sun had set. She stirred, reaching for him, but he kissed her hand and placed it gently on the pillow. She went back to sleep almost immediately. He pulled on his pants, grabbed his cell phone, and went into the living room, shutting the door between him and Ino. The Auto FC was on full blast and he hoped the hum of the cool air seeping through the vents could create enough white noise that his conversation wouldn't wake her. This wasn't something he especially wanted her to hear. After he turned on the lamp, Naruto took out his wallet and located the private number for the chief. It was on a business card tucked behind the only photo he carried. A posed family shot with his parents, taken years ago when he and his father had still been on speaking terms. He pushed that particular reminder aside, laid his wallet on the end table and pressed in the numbers. Jiraiya answered the phone. Two things, Naruto started after they got past the hellos. He sat down even though he figured this might be an especially long conversation. There's not even a hint of impropriety or favoritism on Nara Shikamaru's part. He runs a clean department, and I don't want to be a part of any witch hunt designed to bring him down. The chief paused, made a sound to indicate he was thinking about that. Mind sharing with me how you arrived at this conclusion? I asked questions. A lot of them. In fact, I spent most of Monday and Tuesday doing just that. And besides, I've watched how the man operates. Nara doesn't need to rely on favoritism and impropriety. He gets the job done the old-fashioned way, through hard work and dedication. You're lucky to have him on your team. Pretty frank talk, Jiraiya grumbled. You mean frank talk for a man who's on the brink of a potential promotion? Naruto didn't wait for the chief to confirm it. And that brings me to the second thing I wanted to discuss. After this case, I'll need to be moved from homicide. Say what? I don't think I heard you right, Uzumaki. You want to be moved from a department you fought for months to get into. Another of those sounds of contemplation. Does this have anything to do with Yamanaka Ino? It does, Naruto admitted. I'm personally involved with her, and that means we shouldn't be working together. Well, yeah, it happens. Personal involvement, I mean. Work hard, play hard, and all that other crap we do to get us through the night. But that doesn't mean you have to leave homicide. I can have her moved instead. No, Naruto quickly answered. She stays in homicide. I'm the one requesting the transfer. No, Jiraiya repeated. I swear I didn't see anything in your records to indicate you'd let yourself be ruled by playing hard. You've been like a bulldozer, Rico, pushing and shoving your way to the top. Well, things change. For the first time in his career, there was something more important than the bulldozing, the pushing and the shoving. More important even than his badge. Ino. Now he had to do everything in his power to prevent her from being ked. Jiraiya made Naruto wait several seconds before he delivered his verdict. But the verdict wasn't exactly conclusive. I'll get back to you on these two things you just dumped in my lap, the chief finally snarled. In the meantime, Yamanaka and you need to collar this shed wedding sniper and get the press and the whiny watchdog groups off my back. We're doing out best. Yeah, well, do better. And with that gruff farewell, the chief hung up. Naruto punched the end call button with his thumb and put the phone on the end table next to him. Thin walls, he heard Ino say. He also heard the mattress springs groan when she got off the bed. She appeared in the doorway wearing only her panties, slipping on a shirt. His shirt. Are you sorry you just made that call? No. Naruto didn't even have to think about it. The call was a necessity. But he gave some thought to her. Her hair was all messed up, in a very C sort of way with loose, damp strands framing her face. And then there was her mouth. Man, her mouth always sucker punched him. Her lips were still swollen from the torrid war they'd waged with his mouth. Any idea what you look like standing there? He asked. She glanced down at her seaman torso and smiled. Are you trying to distract me? Maybe. But if so, your distraction's a heck of a lot better than mine. Is that right? Still smiling, she crossed the room. Instead of climbing onto his lap, something he was fantasizing about, Ino pulled the sides of the shirt over her NBS and dropped down on the sofa next to him. She linked her fingers with his, brought his hand to her lips and kissed it. This morning I asked Shika to transfer me to another department, she said with her mouth still against his skin. With the latest round of retirements, I could move to special investigations or vice. No, that's not fair to you. I'm the newcomer. You earned your spot in homicide. She climbed onto his lap. Maybe it was to distract him so he couldn't win this argument. He tried not to let her succeed. His resolve faltered a little when her silky leg brushed against his arm as she straddled him. However, instead of doing anything sual, she kissed his cheek. It was almost chaste. Almost. We are so pathetic. She chuckled. Shika and Chuji would have so much fun if they could see this. You and me arguing with each because we're both putting the other first. It's one for the record, Naruto. Because it was peeking out at him, he gave her right in a gentle pinch. Frankly, I'm glad they aren't here to see this. Having an audience would spoil the moment. And they'd probably try to beat me senseless. She shook her head, and the swish of movement exposed her other bee. No pinch this time. He leaned forward and nipped the tight bud with his teeth. Ino sucked in her breath, gave his already hardening erection a little nudge, but she stopped him from closing his mouth around her N. Seriously, she said, pressing her fingers over his lips. They respect you. And they like you, despite all that posturing and bravado. She reached over and picked up the photo that he'd left on the end table. What about them? She asked. I don't think they like me. Normality, this would have been the point in the conversation where Naruto clams up, but there was nothing normal about anything anymore. My mother SD 6 weeks ago. A drunk driver broadsided her on the way to my father's office. Oh, I'm so sorry. It wasn't just lip service, either. Ino gathered him in her arms, held him and brushed another kiss on his cheek. When she pulled back, he saw that her eyes were misty with tears. He almost shrugged, but decided the tough guy facade wasn't necessary. I didn't get to make my peace with her before she SD. She nodded. That explains the personal leave you took right before your transfer. The one I read from your file, Ino admitted. Yes. He remembered. She probably could have offered a sincere condolence or insisted that his dream of being a cop wasn't something for which he should have to make peace. But she didn't. Ino just sat there, and held him. They stayed that way, wrapped around each other for heaven knows how long. Long enough for Naruto to realize that walking away from Yamanaka Ino wouldn't be just hard. It would be impossible. As incredible as Naruto's arms were, one glance at the clock and Ino knew it was time to get to work. She lifted her head from his shoulder, kissed him, for slightly longer than she'd planned, and eased off his lap. I need to try on the dress, she let him know. I have to figure out where I can put my weapon. Groaning as he got to his feet, he followed her into the bedroom and stood in the doorway, watching her. You said the bouquet was too small to use for cover. Yes. She pointed to the small silk floral arrangement that had been stuffed into the box with the dress. Baby's breath and miniature pink rosebuds just aren't effective for hiding glocks. Go figure. She put on her bra and a long slip first, and then as if bracing herself for a flu shot, Ino grabbed the dress. She eased it on over her head. The silk whispered over her skin. A seriously nice sensation she tried to ignore. I'll need you to do the buttons, she said, ignoring the mirror, as well. She hitched her thumb to the back of the dress and stepped into the satiny pair of off-white shoes. Heels. Uncomfortable ones that pinched her toes. But they put the finishing touches on the costume. Naruto moved behind her. And then he moved her. He positioned her directly in front of the mirror affixed to the outside of the bathroom door. A wide, full-length mirror. And the very one she'd been trying to avoid. We're going to look like those plastic figures that go on top of wedding cakes, she complained as he fastened the buttons. Not exactly true. The dress was real. Naruto was real. And what she felt for him was as real as it got. Still, she'd keep that to herself. With the mission all but closing in around them, this wasn't the time to pour out her heart. He reached in the closet, extracted his tux shirt and jacket and put them on. Since he was already wearing black pants, the only thing missing was the tie. And in true badass form, he threaded it around his collar and left it loose so it dangled against the front of his shirt. Damn. Talk about a surefire way to lose her breath. He simply took it away. He brushed a kiss on her met her gaze in the mirror, and smiled. To give her hands something to do, she snatched up the bouquet and the Glock. Somehow, even the sinister-looking gun couldn't kill the moment. But the doorbell did. Ino groaned when she heard the incredibly annoying sound. Naruto went one step better and cursed. Just a minute, she called out to the visitor. She tossed the bouquet on the bed and checked the time again. It was nearly 10 p.m. Not good. It was probably Chuji or Shikamaru, which meant something have gone wrong. And that put her on an immediate alert. It obviously did the same for Naruto. He hurriedly put on his shoes and grabbed his weapon. The bell rang again. Not a quick jab of sound this time, but a long wail of noise, as if somebody was leaning on the darn thing. When the noise finally stopped, Ino heard a barely audible groan. Who is it? She asked. The person answered something weak and muffled. It was a man, and the image of her friends flew through her head. She turned to run toward the door, but Naruto grabbed her arm. The feeling of panic and dread was so strong, so overwhelming, that Ino nearly pushed him away so she could make sure neither of her friends were hurt. Don't do it, it could be a trap. Naruto reminded her. He was right, of course. After all, they were deep in an undercover investigation, and someone had already tried to kill them. It was a procedure to stay back, to make sure they wouldn't be facing a gun when they opened the door. Still, she had to battle everything inside her to keep her from throwing open the door. And more, she had to trust that Naruto was doing the right thing. Stay behind me, Naruto instructed. He aimed his gun and while staying low, he went into the living room. He reached over and turned off the lamp. Please help me, the voice said from outside the door. She listened for anything recognizable about it, but again it was hardly more than a murmur of pain. If it were a trap, if the person was faking, he was doing an incredibly convincing job. Her heart was racing. Her breath was in her tea. And that buzz was there. That awful buzz in her head that told her all was far from being well. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness, and soon the illumination from the stove panel allowed her to see the two windows that flanked the door. Not clearly though, but at least she could maneuver around and not bump into anything. Moving slowly, Naruto inched away from the lamp toward the window that was closest to him. Ino followed. Not easily though. The dress wasn't exactly meant for skulking about, but there was no way she could fake the time to undo all those buttons and change into something more maneuverable. Naruto didn't step in front of the window but instead crouched even lower and lifted the blinds just a fraction. The security lights in the parking lot are out, he whispered. Okay. That didn't help. Since they'd been working fine the night before, she had to assume that someone had tampered with them. Who's out there? Naruto yelled. He immediately shifted his position so that if it was indeed a trapum the person wouldn't be able to pinpoint his position. The only response they got was another of those painful groans. She prayed it wasn't one of her friends. Call for backup, Naruto said. But tell them not to approach the building, to stay back and await orders. He tossed her his cell phone. Ino snatched it from the air, flipped it open and would have pressed in the numbers for headquarters if something hadn't distracted her. Something seeping from beneath the door onto the tiny patch of cream-colored tile. It was blood. And lots of it. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.